Hey everyone, Broken Meeple review again, and today it's a Clash of Titans. Yes, you may have seen a review I've done a long time ago, I forget if it was even video or written at this point, of Tigris and Euphrates. It's not featured on my top 100 in recent years, but it always features around the kind of top 120 mark. So it's still a game I really like, despite the fact it's a bone-dry abstract Euro game. But it's now got some competition. This newly released Yellow and Yangtze, and I actually did just look up the pronunciation on my phone. That is how you pronounce it, at least according to YouTube, so that's what I'm going by. But Yellow and Yangtze, this is really going to be hard to say when you're drunk, but I'm not drunk. But this is the new kind of sister game to Tigris and Euphrates by Knizia. It's basically 90% the same game. You're still going for the same goals. You are attempting to control areas of the map with tiles, building little buildings in order to score victory points, but in typical Knizia fashion, you are attempting to score the lowest out of all the categories you have. It's kind of a thing he has, where you score in several different categories, but your final score is the lowest of all the categories. So it forces you to balance your sort of gameplay out and not just munchkin one over another, because you could have 20 points in something and 2 points in another, your score is only 2. Whereas if you can get 5 in both, you've got less points overall in the game, but you still win because you've got 5 as opposed to 2. It's a neat little system. I've seen it in a few Knizia games, and even though Knizia is not the first person I turn to for games that I want in my collection, just because it's very mathy, they tend to be very dry games, there are some Knizia games that I do really like. Lost Cities is one, Tigris and Euphrates was another. He does do some great games, just not always a ton, but that I go for. But let's face it, he's got how many games now? You look at his library on Board Game Geek and it is ridiculous. This man has made more games than I think any other designer, probably several other designers put together. Just a machine of putting out games. So with Yellow and Yangtze, I was kind of intrigued to see, okay, why have you released this and not just reprinted Tigris and Euphrates? Well, there are some changes between the two, and I will go into those a bit later. But suffice to say, I will at least be giving this one a review in its own right, if you've never played either. And of course, I will make my comparisons later about which one I prefer. So with Yellow and Yangtze, you are on a hex map, artwork done by Vincent Dutrait, more on that later. And what you are doing is that you have these different coloured tiles, yellow, green, blue, black and red, I think. And each one is quite distinct. They relate to a particular type of person, like a green is a trader, a red is a soldier, a yellow is an artisan, I think, or something like that. Black is a governor, that kind of thing. What you will do is that you will have a screen and some tiles behind your screen, and you are placing your coloured tiles onto the map in such a way that you're trying to control areas of the board. When you have different coloured tiles around each other, then, when you have your leaders, which are separate, like chunky wood tiles that you place down, you have the potential to score points in that particular colour of the leader once you place these other coloured tiles down. In addition to that, if you can get 3 of the same colour tile in a little triangle, because it's all done on hexes, then you get to build pagodas. Pagodas are required, but you have to discard tiles in order to build them, but once you do, they're kind of like ticking points. Like every turn you will get a point in that particular colour as long as you are the controlling leader there. Of course, people aren't going to let you have these areas for long, because not only can people place leaders in your city, or in order to cause internal revolts as they're called, which allow you to swing the controlling power such a way, but also you can have wars between neighbouring kingdoms. A group of tiles together is called a kingdom, or a state I think in this one. And if they collide for any reason, then there's a huge war between the two kingdoms, and then the balance of power can shift in that respect. And that's pretty much the main gist of the game. Some of the characters, the tiles, have some extra abilities, like the blue ones are now the way that you cause desolation in this game, which allows you to effectively destroy tiles on the board. The green traders allow you to pick from a row of tiles at the bottom of the board, because normally when you finish your turn, you draw them out of a bag. Well, with the green trader, you can choose from a row at the bottom right. That allows you to sort of cherry pick a colour you really need. And you carry on in this fashion until I think the tiles in the bag all run out, at which point you look at all the categories of colours that you've scored points for, find the lowest, that is your final score. And of course, you have the different colours of black, red, green and blue to actually score in, but there are also yellow, which is a wild colour and can count for all of them. Similar to how the treasures worked in the previous game, but still slightly different. So that is a very general overview of the game. I didn't want to go into too much detail, but first off, let's talk about artwork and components, particularly I'm going to make comparisons to Tigris Euphrates throughout this review rather than doing a sort of bit at the end. So first off, comparing the two from an artwork perspective. Now, bearing in mind, I have this one, which is the Fantasy Flight Updated Edition. Some of you might have the original one from the 1990s. I'm not referring to that, I'm referring to this, okay? Because I suspect, I'm hoping more people have got this one, but you know, this is what I'm going by. The Fantasy Flight version was not exactly bad. I mean, it had a cool art cover. It had, you know, square tiles, a square map, but it also had big chunky plastic pieces that represented the temples. The tiles were good quality. The artwork was okay. I mean, you only have to draw a desert-like map with a river across it. You know, there's not much to it. But, you know, generally, component quality was pretty solid for Tigris. With Yellow and Yangtze, it's going to get really hard to say those words, but the hex map is a welcome addition. I quite like the way the hexes work, but the artwork is done by Vincent Dutrait, who I swear does nothing in his life but draw. The amount of games that are coming out this year and recently with Vincent Dutrait's artwork, it's like the guy doesn't sleep. What is it with this man? But his artwork is generally really good. It's not generally the style I always go for. You know, I prefer some of the more neater CGI-esque type artwork, but there's no doubt in saying that this does look really nice. I mean, the cover is a lot more striking with the sort of Chinese governor on the front, with the nice bright colour so it sticks out on the shelf. But even the map itself, you know, it's a nice vibrant green land with the blue rivers across it. The tiles are not as thick as they are in Tigris and Euphrates, but they're still decent, but they've got an actual picture on them, you know, like a proper sort of picture of the person, which is really cool. And the general, like, everything just kind of sings well. You do have to put up with the fact that as much as it's nice to have these chunky wooden hexagon pieces for your leaders and the tiles, you kind of have to accept you've got cubes for victory points. But to be fair, you kind of just had similar little bead things. I mean, what did you have in the old one? I'm trying to think. You just had little point counters. Yeah, you just had little point counters for Tigris and Euphrates, so cubes is not exactly a massive upgrade, but they're all in the different colours and there's little ones and big ones depending on 1 to 5 points. Although, of course, you can tell already, don't play this if you're colourblind. You know, not a good idea, because as much as you can define the tiles by the picture, you can't define the cubes. So if you've got the cubes behind your screen and you're colourblind, what have I got low points in? You ain't got a clue. You'd have to find some like mystical way to be able to tell what's yellow, blue, red, or whatever. So, a bit of an annoyance there. You know, maybe they could have done something about it. Perhaps they could have included some like little, maybe like a little tiny player board with red, blue, whatever, and then you could just put the cubes on there or something as a way of sort of highlighting it yourself. I don't know, but like I say, not the most colourifying friendly game I can think of. But it looks the part. I don't think one is overly better than the other. I might give the slight nudge to Yellow and Yangtze, but you know, it's not like the Fantasy Flight version is particularly bad. I would say though that compared to the 1995 edition, whatever it was, 1990s edition of Tigris and Euphrates, yeah, this one wins hands down. But as I say, I'm going against the Fantasy Flight one. Now, what made Tigris and Euphrates a really good, fun, abstract game for me was just how much strategy was involved and how it scaled really well. 2, 3, or 4 players, the game was a blast. It wasn't just simply a case of, oh, just stick a tile down here, stick a leader down here and see what happens. No, you're trying to set up with the tiles you've got ways to score the points in the categories you want, but you're also thinking, so-and-so's building a nice little kingdom over there. Maybe I'll just migrate in that direction and start thinking about war. But then are you likely to win it? You know, you might just try to think, well, that guy's got a city with a really big pagoda in it, therefore I want to, get some points from that. I'm going to need to be able to win this battle, right? I'm going to need these tiles, I'm going to have to get that leader off the board and put him over there. You know, he's going to see this coming, so he's going to set up defenses, I better be quick. Yeah, there's a lot of good strategic elements in this game. Not so much in the way of, I'd say, tactics in the game. You know, you've got to react a little bit to what's going on the board, but for the most part, you've got your own strategy in place. And, you know, when you see things develop, you might augment that strategy slightly to compensate for everything else. But it really is quite a thinky game. Not heavily brain-burny. We're not talking super brain-burny here, but it's certainly enough to make you think and maybe want to take a little break after you've done playing it. But it doesn't take too long to finish either, which is a big plus. You know, most of these brain burny games are 3 hours plus. It's like, oh my god, I can't think straight afterwards. You know, Yellow and Yangtze and Tigris and Euphrates, you can get them wrapped up in a good 90 minutes, really. It's not that long of a game. And that is pretty solid for something that, you know, makes you really do think and consider during that time. Now, to go over some more key differences between Tigris and Yellow, we'll highlight some of the cool things about this game. Now, in Tigris, the colours weren't very distinct. Black was kind of, black and red were kind of like the main powerful colours, because black was kind of like a wild thing, like if there was no other colour there, you default to the black leader, and red was kind of the big game changer when it came to combats. Red, blue was kind of, no, sorry, green and blue were just kind of there. You know, there wasn't a huge amount of use for them. You know, they weren't that distinctive, because blue was literally just puts on the river. Whoopee. That's pretty much it. But with here, they've got some distinct characteristics, which I really like. The reds are soldiers, so they can be used to help you in combat, which is quite cool. And even with, as well as the tiles being distinct, the leaders are distinct. If you have the leader spare behind your screen of that colour, you can get yourself a little bonus or a little sort of a little helping hand by having that leader take the place of a tile. So it's quite a nice dynamic of, well, if it's on the board, it's doing this, but if it's behind my screen, it's also doing that. So which one do I prefer? With the green ones, as I said, there is a row of tiles at the bottom of the board, and using green traders and leaders allows you to get you one of those tiles. This mitigates a problem that people had with Tigris and Euphrates, which was the luck factor. You drawing tiles out of a bag and you have 6 behind your screen. So you were kind of half guided by what colours you pulled. And if you got into combat, you had no real idea whether somebody had a lot of a particular colour or not. This still has that. You are still drawing out of a bag and you have them behind your screen. But those green tiles allow you to cherry pick certain colours so you can mitigate the luck to a greater extent. The blue ones, as I mentioned, you know, they've got in the old days, I think you had like a desolation tile or something that you put down on the board when you wanted to destroy actual tiles on the board. Here, the blue ones help you do that. So, you know, blue has now got an additional use. Yellow is a wild colour, so yellow can be used for anything, and as you can imagine, yellow pagodas, oh yeah. A temple, a pagoda that gives you ticking wild points every turn, you can bet yourself that people are going to fight over that one, I guarantee it. And the black ones, I forget what the black ones are like. It's more that, let's see, oh yeah, black ones work similar to how the red ones work. So red gives you extra bonus strength in a war, whereas the black tends to do it in an internal revolt. So each of the colours has a good distinct use, and that's certainly an upgrade from Tigris and Euphrates. The pagodas themselves are also a little bit different from how the temples worked before. With the temples in Tigris, you had to build 4 tiles of the same colour in a 2x2 grid. Bear in mind it was a square board. In doing so, they flipped over, so they were no longer counting as the colours they were. The temple went on it, but it counted as 2 colours. It had like you could have like a black base and then a tiny little blue bit on top, so it ticked over both of those colours. That could cause some big swings in how the cities were, and it got a little bit confusing, like people would miss out on points for certain temples because it's like, it's a blue one. Oh, there's a tiny little green thing on top. Oh yeah, I should have noticed that. Here though, 1 colour, 1 pagoda. So there's no dual colour system, and because it's a hex board, you only need to get 3 in a little triangle to build a pagoda. So it's a lot easier to get them on the board. Of course, makes them that little bit more tantalizing for war and combat, so people are going to be fighting over these quite nasty. The other thing to note though is that the tiles do not flip over. So if you build 3 red tiles and there's a pagoda there, 3 red tiles still stay there and count for other things in the game. And the pagodas can therefore be destroyed a lot easier, because if the tile goes for whatever reason, then the pagoda goes as well, usually by way of war and revolt. So the pagodas are definitely a bit better in this in terms of points, you know, but then that means they're just going to be contested more. People could sort of leave the temples in the old version and not worry too much after a while, but here, yeah, people are going after those pagodas. You know, if one springs up, it's like, ooh, hello, mind if I come over here? It's like, people just start congregating over. It's like, they see the bright light in the sky and go, ooh, what's that? And then just start marching their way over. So you got to be prepared for it, and of course that's part of the strategy. It's not just offense, it's also defense. Combats have certainly taken a bit of a change in this one as well. They work in a similar fashion, but there are a couple of key differences. You know, the internal revolts are quite similar. You're using a particular colour of tile in order to defend yourself against whoever the invading leader is. And if you lose, then, you know, your leader is kicked out, the winner gets a point and continues with control of that city. So they haven't changed much. The wars, however, when two states unite through a use of a tile, everyone is fighting. It's not just the two leaders, it's the two kingdoms that are fighting. So even if you're not necessarily involved in the initial attack and defense thing, you can still contribute. I'll give an example here. Let's say two kingdoms have gone up against each other, and the attacking kingdom has, I don't know, player A, and the defending kingdom has player B and C. Now, player A will basically, sorry if you can hear an ice cream van out there, it is quite sunny out here, but player A will contribute tiles towards the attack. Player B will contribute tiles to the defense, but so can player C. C can sort of look at the outcomes and go, if they win, this is going to happen. If they win, that's going to happen. Who do I actually want to win this fight? They can sort of take sides. You know, do you want to help me in the defense? No, not really. I'd rather he actually got the attack, if you don't mind. But say somebody's coming in, it's like, no, I quite like the kingdom how it is, really. So, you know, I'm going to contribute some tiles towards the defense. It's a good way of getting rid of tiles if you don't need them. But I like the way that that extra person dynamic comes in. And of course, this is going to be apparent in 3 and 4 player games, not a 2-player game. The rulebook is not particularly huge. You know, there's a, what are we talking, a 9-page rulebook. And some of that is mainly just to illustrate how a combat works. I highly recommend you read through that pictorial example because it is very good at explaining how it works. But apart from that, yeah, it pretty much just explains the turn sequence you have, what actions you're allowed to do, and setup. And other than that, the rules are not actually very complex. All the complexity and depth for this game, and Tigris in equal respect, came from the strategy of where to place the tiles. When do I start a revolt? When am I expecting a war to take part? How am I going to score lots in the blue colour when I'm doing so well in green, red and yellow? I'm sorry, green, red and black. Yeah, and a lot of that comes into play. Now, can you have both? That's a tougher question. Personally, I don't think you can. The reason being that if I was to compare the two and say, like, you know, the main key difference is yellow has got some upgrades from Tigris. If Tigris has an advantage over anything, it's possibly that it's got a double-sided board, which is certainly good. You know, you have 2 different maps to play on, but apart from all you're really doing is changing where some of the cities are on the river, whoopee-doo. But it was also a bit more constrained for 2 players, the original Tigris. So 2 players worked a little better in this one than they do in this one, but not by a long shot. It's a case of, do you want a tighter map or do you want a slightly more open map? Pick your voice, tomato, tomato, really. So I can play 2-player in either, but you could give Tigris the slight nudge for being slightly better with 2. Personally, though, it's unlikely I'm going to play this with 2 very often. I would more than likely be playing it with 3 or 4. And again, 3, probably the sweet spot, but 4's not bad either. You know, 3 or 4 player I could play this with, but I could play it with 2. Yellow and Tigris scale really well. They are some of the best examples for a game that scales well. So there's not a huge amount of difference there. So if I was to say, can you have both? I think they're too similar. There's just too much. It's the same concept. Score the lowest of your categories. Put tiles on the board. Internal and external revolts and wars. Aside from a few changes that this one has added, they're very much identical games. You know, they don't feel any that much different apart from those little changes I've mentioned. So I'd be hesitant to think that you need both in the collection. If you've already got Tigris, should you get yellow? I don't think so. I think you could pretty much be happy with Tigris. Is yellow better than Tigris? You know, well, they're 2. They're really good. You want me to pick one that I think's better? Yeah, yellow. I honestly think that yellow is a better game than Tigris. Those additional rules that I have mentioned with the green row and the blues, the distinct colours, the wild colour, the hex board, the pagodas, all those little changes are an example of what little changes you can make that make a big impact. And for that, I certainly think yellow has pretty much replaced Tigris and Euphrates for me. I no longer need Tigris in my collection because I don't want both. You know, I may have both, but when am I ever going to say, you know what I feel like? Do I feel like yellow or do I feel like Tigris today? No, I'm likely to pick yellow. It's just the way it is, no matter how much I have trouble pronouncing the full name all the time. Yellow and Yangtze. I really enjoy it. It's a solid game. It's you know, like I say, it's an abstract game at the end of the day. There's no theme with this. It doesn't matter whether you make it Chinese states and delegates or whatever on earth this one was, but it's like, you know, it really makes no difference. It's an abstract game, but it's nice to have a multiplayer abstract game. So, you know, overall, I really like it. Top 100 material, maybe bottom half of the top 100, because I do really like it, but compared to a lot of other games, there are some of those ones I'd rather play. But this is still really cool, really solid. Personally, about an 8 for me. It's solid. You should definitely check it out if you're a fan of strategic abstract Euros. So that's it from me, Yellow and Yangtze the review. I'll see you next time, and whatever colour you're aiming for, just remember it's only a game. Take care, and I'll see you next time.